He says to her, we're going to make this crudité platter because that's another way to serve kimchi. But crudité platters are so boring. Everybody just serves it with ranch. And there are other ways to elevate it. And she's like taken aback. How dare you criticize my crudité? She just cannot with what he has just said. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise, and we are on episode 3 of Meghan's show, With Love, Meghan. This time she had an actual chef in her midst. His name is Roy Choi, and he is, as she says, a very iconic figure in Los Angeles. And she wanted to feature Korean cooking on her show because it's a very California show. She's from LA, and she wanted to showcase part of what she says is integral to LA culture. So she invited Roy Choi on. They don't know each other. She says that, they're not friends, but according to her, they're going to be friends by the end of this episode. He was exceedingly happy to be invited and is quite complimentary of her. And he says in this show, I couldn't believe that you invited me. I didn't even know that you knew who I was. I love you. So this was a huge compliment to me. I got my questions about Roy Choi, but we'll go to the end of this. I will say that he was a very friendly guest, very warm to her. And obviously, he doesn't know her, as they said. So this was supposedly them meeting for the first time. I will say that I watched this episode twice. Because last night I was watching it on the couch with my husband and thinking, well, this isn't that bad. There is, of course, that one scene that everyone has played, that one viral clip.
That doesn't sound like the Choi of cooking.
Yeah. Honestly, that wasn't the flavor of the whole episode. So I'm watching it and I'm thinking to myself, well, the food's more interesting because Roy Choi's the one here who's making it. These are his recipes. Honestly, the worst part of the show, food-wise, was the stuff she came up with. It was more interesting because what he was making was new and different. It was actually something that you might aspire to. Again, it's not a cooking show, though. Even though we have a chef on and even though he's making food, we are left with no ability to replicate these recipes. So if you thought you were going to watch this show with a pen and pad and you could jot something down, you're up the creek without a paddle, right? So you're just watching people cook. But if this is supposed to inspire you to duplicate, replicate, and to live the life that Meghan is espousing, good luck with that. So that's kind of frustrating. It was frustrating to me because the food looked amazing and it would have been really cool to make it, but you can't. So there's that. But anyway, but I watched it one time last night. I don't know if I was just really tired or just not in the mood to be nitpicky, but I was like, Meghan's not as annoying in this episode. The food's better. I was like, how are we going to make a whole episode about this? Because is there really that much to say? But then this morning I rewatched it. And I guess with a fresh mind, I had new thoughts. And they are definitely less obvious. Like in the Mindy episode, it's like, where do we begin with how clunky this was?
It's so funny, too, that you keep saying Meghan Markle. I'm Sussex now.
And in the previous episode with Daniel, the makeup artist, I mean, she should have started out, honestly, with this Roy Choi episode. Because this is a much better side to her. If they could have edited out that one moment in which her face is looking like Satan himself, this would have been a pretty decent episode. Upon second watching, I had new thoughts in my head. Meghan, as always, has to make something for her guests. And there always needs to be a moment in which she's impressing the person coming over. Well, she decides that because she's from LA and he's from LA and LA is the donut capital of the world, what better thing to make for hometown boy than donuts? Except for she decides to go all the way back to 2014 and make a baked donut. Yuck. If you're going to eat a donut, And the thing, too, that surprised me was that she's like, well, this is the first time I'm making donuts. Really? Home cook? First time? But this is the first time she's made donuts. And she decided that it might be less risky if she goes baked donut. Can't have all that oil splattering everywhere. God forbid it. I'm telling you right now that if you're going to serve a chef donuts and he's coming over to make fried chicken, I don't think he's opposed to getting that fry oil out. You know what I'm saying? And I also feel like if you're trying to impress him with hometown flavors, the baked donut is not the way to go. We all know that if you're going to have somebody over, the last thing you do is make something you've never made before. And then a lesser version of it? Come on, Meghan. Whatever, she's going to make her baked donuts. Basically, it's just a muffin in a different shape. It's not a donut. So Don't confuse yourself. It's a muffin in a donut shape with frosting on top, a glaze. Anyway, she makes these muffins, and you know, I kind of take back what I said in the last episode, because last episode I was trying to defend her, and I was like, look, she's not like some big chef or anything, but it seems like she feels comfortable in the kitchen. She seems like she's not measuring. She's just like making things. Well, yeah, with a frittata, anybody could do that with a frittata. She's over here making these donuts, and the way she's measuring out these ingredients is like she's never cracked an egg before. She's never scraped anything out of a bowl before. When she is piping the batter into this pan, which is another way it's not a real donut, because real donut is actually like bread dough, but she's squeezing this batter into this thing, and I mean it's not neat. And I had said in the last episode, she seems okay in the kitchen. Granted, she's cutting with a small knife and all this, but she's probably fine. I've seen her cook a few things now, and she's not fine. Anyway, that is beside the point. She makes her donuts, and then of course when the donut comes out, she says, after dipping them in her glaze, now this is the part where you add any kind of little things you want to add on. Chocolate chips, sprinkles. We're going to do flour sprinkles. And I'm like, oh my goodness, Meghan, do you have any other ideas in your head? The flour sprinkles, again, I didn't make a big point of it in the last episode because everyone's been talking about the flour sprinkles. So I'm not going to pile on. I'm trying to think of new things to say here. But when she pulled out the flour sprinkles for the donuts too, I mean, it's just getting to the point now where it's like, there are other toppings. There's not a flavor benefit added. It's just for the look. And the first time she ever did it, okay, put your little flour sprinkles on once. But to every single time, here's a fruit platter, sprinkle, sprinkle. Here's some eggs, sprinkle, sprinkle. Here's some donuts, sprinkle, sprinkle. It's like, enough with the flour sprinkles already. Anyway, flour sprinkles on the donuts, and she's just like beside herself with how these turned out. And she can't wait for Roy Choi to get there so he can have some of her delicious donuts too. And again, I just feel like if I am going to invite somebody over and make a big point about the fact you're from LA and I'm from LA and we grew up eating actual donuts, and then she serves this thing to an actual chef, I mean, don't go out of your way, Meghan. And don't show it to us like we've never seen a baked donut before. It's just old. It's old ideas. It's old Pinteresty ideas from like 10 years ago. It's just hard to feel excited about what it is that she's putting in front of us because we've seen it 1,000 times. Like in the last episode, the balloon arch, and now we're going with the baked donuts. It's weird because they're all so trendy from a certain time. And it's just crazy to me that she's trying to put forth these ideas like she's delivering a new product. Anyway, we have so many things to talk about. We have to move on. All right, she's making the donuts. She's giving her annoying commentary to the editor. Cue the music, cue the montage. It's like, all right, Meghan, we have a director on set. While she's making the donuts, he says to her, this would be a fun breakfast for your kids. And she's like, wouldn't they love that? Donuts for breakfast. What kid wouldn't love a sugary donut for breakfast? And you get to, it's like, I'm not feeding sugar to my kids. Yeah, okay. I mean, that's an idea, Brooklyn. That's the director, but we're not going with that. Anyway, as she makes the donuts, she's got to give all of her, little shallow, warm fuzzies. It's just so fun to do something new. I've never cooked this before. It's just part of being alive is learning new things. And it's just the little things like that for me. It's just the little things. Anyway, as she's prepping the donuts, getting the donuts ready and cleaning up after the donuts, she says, I'm kind of a neat freak in the kitchen. I clean as I go. Like, that's a new thing. We should clean as we go. Like, everybody knows that. Now, do I do it? No. But she's letting you know, clean as you go, clean as you go. We have to impress Roy Choi. He's coming. And I really, really want to impress him with how clean and tidy I am in the kitchen and how much I know about being in the kitchen. So we're going to start now. We're going to start practicing now. So finally, Roy Choi gets there. And she wants him to eat one of her donuts before they get down with what they're there for that day. And one of the things that I do not find charming is that she doesn't know where anything is on the set, right? Of course, this isn't her house, as we've been told many a time. But because this isn't her house, she doesn't know where anything is. And it's like, girl, why did you not take time to familiarize yourself with this set? The director has spoken out since this show has come out, old Brooklyn, who's always there in the corner. And he says that he thinks it's charming that she's sort of like bumbling around, not really sure where things are in her pantry, not sure where the dishes, the napkins, the utensils are. And I'm like, no, it's annoying. It's awkward that she's trying to offer him food, this donut, but she can't find the napkins for him. She can't find little plates for him. I don't find that charming at all. I find it distracting, and I feel it takes away from the experience that she's trying to give to Roy Choi. My question to you is, how could you be on a set and not know where things are when you know that it is essential to the movement of the scene that you do know where things are? Anyway, Brooklyn thinks it's charming. I think it's lame. She's talking to him about this, that, and the other, just this little chatter as they sort of get to know each other. Like I said in the opening, he was really excited to meet her. They give each other a hug. They're like, we're just two kids from LA and all this. And she says to him, amid a bunch of other things, because they'd been talking about how they were from LA and then they moved off of it. And then randomly, they inject this sentence that was clearly edited in, where she says, so many people think that they know what Angelinos are like, but they don't know anyone from Los Angeles. And then they go on with the conversation, and I'm like, what is that random sentence? Angelinos? Honestly, never heard of anybody referred to from Los Angeles as an Angelino. I guess that shows my vast cavern of ignorance, but I guess the point is that she and Roy Choi are going to let the whole world in on what two people from Los Angeles are truly like. All right, look, I liked Roy Choi. He seemed really kind and warm, but at the same time, he's a little odd himself, and we'll get into it. Okay, so after they get done eating the donuts, we go back in time to when she is fixing a recipe that he had told her to make. And while she's talking to Brooklyn, the director, and making this brine, she's all about the puns and the little silly word fillers. And I noticed this in the first episode, and it was very annoying, and I can't believe I forgot to say it. That episode, the first episode, all about the bees, all about the honey that she got. Everything has to do with those bees. And every time they would have anything to do with the honey, she and Daniel would turn to each other and go, honey, honey. Let's get the honey, honey. Let's get that honey, honey. It was so weird and lame. It would have been lame the first time she said it, but then she kept saying it, and then Daniel kept saying it, right? And I can't remember what it was. She had a couple of them in the Mindy episode. I can't remember. But now in this episode, she's making the brine for this chicken because they're going to make fried chicken, but it's got to sit in brine. So she had to do this prep work the day before because the chicken had to sit overnight. So she's making the brine, and she's making a big deal about how she's going to follow the directions on this brine. Usually when she's making a brine at home, she's just throwing in everything. There's no measuring. There's no conceptualization as to what ingredients you're putting into the brine and your hopes and purposes and point for the brine that the chicken's going in. But this time she's really going to follow the recipe. It's the same way that she talked about getting that beeswax situation going to make the candles. It's like, why are you making a point of following the recipe? That's why you have a recipe. But anyway, she's making it, and she says to the director, now, I'm going to be very careful because this isn't the sort of thing that you can wing. Get it? Chicken wings. Can't wing it. Gotta be careful. Now, of course, she's not as obvious as that, but she says her little joke and then looks pointedly into the camera like, get it. And then over on her blackboard in the kitchen, it has written, just gonna wing it. She'd already thought of this pun, and she was really excited to work it into the thing about the brine, but then she went so far as to write it on her blackboard. I mean, literal ouch. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's so lame, but then to use it twice, I can't. But as she's talking about the brine, she says, we have to be really careful about making this because he has literally put all his stock in this stock. So we're going to be real careful that we get it right. It's just like, Meghan, this is so stupid. So anyway, she makes the brine. And while she's making it, she has questions about what she's being asked to do. This brine has not only beer in it, but also milk. The milk blows her mind. Like, she can't even believe it. But then she talks about it because she clearly looked up the fact that if you put milk into a brine, the lactic acid will break down whatever enzymes you're trying to break down, make the chicken more tender. So she says, why would they put the milk in? Is it because of the lactic acid? And of course, later she's going to ask Roy Choi the same thing because she wants everyone to know that she knows about the science of the brine. But after she gets done pouring the beer in, she's got extra beer on the counter. So she takes 2 glasses and she pours 2 glasses of beer, and she hands one to the director, and then she has a glass herself. And the reason I point this out is it's becoming really strange to me how many times she serves Brooklyn while we know there's a whole film crew across the counter from her whom she never serves. Brooklyn over here has gotten coffee. He's about to get samples of the cooking. He's getting a glass of beer. And it's weird to me that she's drinking and Brooklyn's drinking, but all the other people are excluded who we know are present. And for a show that's all about hosting, why are we excluding so many people? Don't give Brooklyn anything. Brooklyn doesn't need to be eating, drinking, and merrymaking. His job here is to direct whatever it is that you're trying to do. And your constant communication with him, obviously, is strange. I've never seen anybody on any cooking show have this weird relationship with the director of the cooking show. But now we're serving one person to the exclusion of others. I just think it undermines the whole point of the show, which is let's love everyone in small ways. After we finish going back in time with the brine, we go back to her, Roy Choi, in the kitchen. And he has come to make a plethora of things. Let me just say, they packed in a ton in this episode. And like I said at the beginning, well, when you don't tell me how to make any of this stuff, it's really easy to show me 1,000 things. So in this episode, of course, we've started out with her donuts, but then they're going to make pickles, then they're going to make kimchi, then they're going to make chicken, then they're going to make sauces. And of course, she's got to have her crudité tray in, because if there's not a crudité tray in, she can't breathe. I'm strangled. So he says, let's make the pickles. And he says pickles are easy. We're going to do this thing that he calls quickles, because they're quick pickles. I'm sure she loved that. And he says you can just pickle all kinds of stuff. At the end, they're like pickling strawberries. I mean, he's not kidding. And there's not a recipe that they're following. She's opening up her spice rack and she's like, what do you want? And he's like, just get whatever. And she's like, but what do you want? Oh, just get whatever. And he says, we're going to pickle. People think it's really hard to pickle, but it isn't. And she's like, but what will we put in it? And he says, oh, let's just put in what we think is right. That's what's fun about cooking, right? And I'm like, but no, I mean, like, that's not helpful. What kind of spices do I put in a pickle brine? I don't know. For the person watching this show who thought that they might be able to make some Korean pickles, good luck. Just watch carefully, because they're not going to tell you what's in it. Just however the spirit moves. That's how you make a pickle. However the spirit moves. So I guess if that's the condition on making pickles, Roy Choi's right. It's not that hard. Just throwing a bunch of crap into a jar and hope for the best. Well, they are talking about vegetables and things, because veggies obviously very featured in this, because they're going to make kimchi to go with her crudité tray, and he's going to show her how to pack the kimchi in with vegetables so that they can ferment and all this stuff. So they're talking about vegetables. He's asking, have you always liked to garden? And he says, for himself, that he has never had a green thumb. Never a moment in his life has he had a green thumb. And then he starts talking about the farmers, though, that he's always worked with, because, of course, he's always worked with a lot of fresh produce. And in this moment of what I think he was attempting to be quite serious, he says that all the farmers he's worked with have this very spiritual connection with the land. And, he goes off on this kind of wild tangent about they could just put their thumb in the ground and they could tell what's going to happen in the next 3 months, At first I thought he was joking, I thought when he said a spiritual connection, I thought he was just talking about, they can make things grow. They can, they know what it takes. I mean, I don't know. People in LA use that term kind of loosely. But he goes on. He's like, no, I could never do that. I could never put my thumb in the dirt and know what's going to happen, rain, weather, what the ground needs with the plants. And I can't do that. But what I can do is I can pick up this vegetable right here, and it's like a sci-fi movie. It's like a jolt goes through my arm, and I know what this vegetable needs, what it needs me to extract from it, what flavors it needs. I'm like one with this vegetable when I hold it. I get like this supernatural connection. Clearly, he's trying to impart some depth of knowledge. And Meghan, who couldn't read a room to save her soul, is like, oh, so you're really one with that vegetable. Okay, that's interesting. You are really serious about that vegetable. And, I mean, it's kind of awkward what he's saying. It's pretty bogus. But at the same time, you shouldn't make fun of people who are trying to impart something that clearly seems meaningful to them, or they're trying to say something deep. Even if you know that it is as shallow as a puddle, at least give them the respect of listening to them and not belittling this thing that they're trying to share with you, as bogus as it may be. Just let them talk, you know? Don't try to lighten the moment or bring levity to something because you don't really get what they're saying. Just let them be. But I mean, of course, that's just Meghan. Like, I don't think she has the depth or the understanding or the wherewithal to think. She's always think of the other person, think of the other person. Okay, well, this is a perfect opportunity. You don't have to hand somebody a package of food that you have repackaged and repurposed in order for them to feel loved, as you seem to think, Meghan. A great way for people to feel loved is just listen to them. Just let them talk. And let them feel that what they said was valid. Doesn't really matter what you think. Unless they're just talking total and utter trash. But, you know, if they're just trying to share something that they think is kind of deep or that has meaning to them, you don't need to try to make a joke out of it. Anyway. What's interesting is when it's her turn to talk about her gardening, he says, you know, is this a new passion for you, a new hobby, or is this something that you've always done? And of course, she wants to remind us that she went to, you know, the Little Red Schoolhouse or whatever. And she says, well, you know, I did grow up gardening when I was like 10 or 11. It was a big part of our program was gardening. And, you know, it's like urban gardening down there. You know where the school is. And we just learned so much. I mean, I was so immersed in the gardening. I mean, we learned about composting and, you know, what nasturtiums are. So yeah, it's been a big deal for me. Composting and nasturtiums, this is the way you explain this in-depth knowledge that has soaked through your blood, brain, and cells ever since you were but a wee thing? Okay. All right. Well, they go into the garden so they can get more things to pickle. This is where he says, why don't we pickle some strawberries? And it blows her mind, which honestly blows my mind too, because, I mean, pickled strawberries don't sound good. And if anybody wants to mock Meghan and be like, you need to be more open-minded, please. Do you want to eat a pickled strawberry? I don't think so. But anyway, she's like, I don't know. I never would have thought about that, but you're Roy Choi, so you would know. And so while they're on the garden, there's like this one moment that they is actually kind of charming where Meghan is being who I think she wanted to be this whole time. And they're going through the garden and picking some different things. And she says, oh, try this pepper. It's really spicy. And he's like, that doesn't look like a spicy pepper. That looks like a banana pepper. And she's like, no, it is. And so he takes a bite and he looks at the camera and is like, it's not spicy. And she's like, yes, it is. I had some yesterday. And so she tries it and she's like, oh, it's not spicy. It's not the same thing I had yesterday. And they kind of have a laugh about it. And then they go inside. And like, I feel like in that moment, Meghan is, you know, she kind of made a little bit of a mistake saying, oh, it's a really spicy pepper, kind of wanting him to be impressed by the heat, and then he wasn't. And then, you know, they have a little bit of a laugh about it. And I think that, like, that is a moment where I think Meghan was more at ease. And honestly, in this whole episode, I feel like she's much more at her ease than she was in the first and second episodes. It was easier to watch. I'll be honest with you. So most of my nitpicking has less to do with her and just kind of like more about what's happening. So anyway, they go inside to make their pickles with all their, they made a bunch of pickles in the house before, but now they're going to add to it. And they chop up all their veggies. They put it in with this mysterious pickle brine that we never learned how to make. And she says to him, how long do you let these macerate? I had to rewind it because that's not what I thought she said. I was like, macerate? What is that word? And obviously that means like, how long do we let these pickle? But she's constantly throwing in these words to impress him with what she knows and, you know, that she knows the right words and the technical terms. And that's about as far as this narcissist can go. You know, just learning just enough to make it seem like I know what I'm talking about. So she asks, how long do these have to macerate? And what I think is interesting is he's not frou-frou when it comes to the kitchen. He's not trying to impress her with like technical terms, technical knowledge, or any of this. In fact, later on when they're making this kind of rub for the chicken, he has her pour in what he calls chicken powder. And she's like, chicken powder? What is that? And he's like, it's like bouillon. And she's like, well, bouillon sounds better, you know, a little less clunky than chicken powder, you know. So it's like she's over here using words like macerate. And he is calling bouillon chicken powder. You know, she chose the wrong person to try to impress because I don't think that kind of thing is impressive to him. Anyway, they finish letting the pickles macerate. And as they're getting ready to make the kimchi paste, he's watching her cut things, and the rest of us are watching her cut things, and the rest of us are thinking, what is happening over here with you and that paring knife? And he actually says, wow, you got some great knife skills, Meghan. And that is the point at which I began to raise an eyebrow to old Roy Choi. What are you talking about, man? We know that's not true. You are a fraud. And this is when I really feel that he revealed himself as somebody who was there to hustle. Now, of course he was there to hustle, but it became extraordinarily obvious to me that he was hoping that this association with Meghan was really going to increase his standing in some way. He could not have been more wrong. So while he's prepping a bunch of the vegetables to go with their kimchi that they're making, because he's going to show her how to pack some of this into jars and then it can ferment with the kimchi paste, she's making a crudité tray because she's going to dip some of these veggies in the paste and just eat it like that. And so he says to her, you know, we're going to make this crudité platter because that's another way to serve kimchi. But crudité platters are so boring. You know, everybody just serves it with ranch. And there are other ways to elevate it. And she's like taken aback. How dare you criticize my crudité? You know, she just cannot with what he has just said. And it's like a knife to her heart. And he actually calls her on it. He's like, I saw the LA come out in you when you saw that I thought crudité platters were boring. And she's like, well, it's just that I make a lot of them. And it's just about the display. It's about making something really beautiful. Like, I'm going to make this crudité platter and you're going to be so amazed at how beautiful it can be. I am telling a color story with this crudité platter. A color story? Like, what are you talking about? Like, this isn't the color purple here, Meghan. Like, what are you even talking about? I'm going to tell a color story. What does that even mean? What story are you telling with these vegetables? What do I need to internalize before I'm allowed to dip this raw broccoli into the kimchi paste? All right. Well, anyway, while they're talking and chopping and carrying on, she wants him to know that she has a real appreciation for his Korean culture. And so they start talking about how Korean culture is just integral to the LA culture and that you can't really even have one without the other. And of course, she has to let us know that she knows about the Korean spas because her mom was into the Korean spas. And she's already talked about this on the Archetype podcast. Meghan has so few stories. So few things have happened to her. But she seems to know just enough about his Korean culture to make him feel at ease. And, you know, it's clear that he appreciates what she has to offer. And so he gets very giddy about it. It's like, you know, we're just the same. You and I wish we would have met so long ago. He's so complimentary of her. At first, I thought it was just being nice. And then when he complimented her knife skills, I knew he was just a fraud. But as they're talking, this is when we have the infamous moment where she asks him if he likes to listen to music while he cooks. He says yes. He listens to different kind of music. She's nodding her head. Yes, yes, yes. Then he says he likes to listen to death metal and speed metal. And she looks like somebody has just run a spear through her. What? You know, she just cannot even believe he would say something so seemingly crazy. And so she judges him up one side and down the other. Let's watch.
Do you listen to music when you're cooking?
I do. I listen to a lot of lyrical hip hop, jazz, sometimes speed metal, death metal.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
What's speed metal?
Just like dark.
That doesn't sound like the joy of cooking.
Yeah, but, you know, we all have different sides to who we are.
That's true. Multifaceted folks. That's what we are.
It's good for when you're butchering. So I cut these into square.
When she's done mocking him and making him feel like an idiot, it's time to move on to that chicken that she's been working on since yesterday. Remember, she made the brine. She put the chicken in the brine. It's been sitting there all night. And it's time to get back to it. Now, much has been made of this chicken. The internet was on fire because they thought that Meghan had put raw chicken in her fridge next to fresh fruits and veggies and that the chicken wasn't even covered. Now, granted, it looks pretty bad if you didn't watch the episode. But see, if you're not willing to watch the episode, you just don't get to criticize. You don't, because you don't know what's happening. Meghan had made the chicken, it had been in the brine, in the fridge, in a pot covered, the raw chicken was. Then she's told to parboil the chicken in the juices. And so she takes the chicken out of the brine. The pan is set to boil, and she had parboiled these pieces of chicken according to his recipe. Now, she doesn't even understand why she's doing this, because she feels like it's going to make the chicken tough to start cooking it and then to quit. And I'm like, that's why you brined it, Meghan. That's why it won't be tough. But anyway, she does this whole exercise of parboiling the chicken. And this is one of those let's go back in time scenes. So she's over there parboiling and doubting his wisdom. And then when it's done, she takes the cooked chicken and she puts it on a rack, and then that rack goes into the fridge. Now, it's strange to me that you would not cover the chicken, just because who just puts something into the fridge uncovered? The atmosphere in the fridge, that's what's going to dry it out. And how long has it been sitting in there, you know? So it does look strange to have uncovered meat in a fridge in any context. You know, the smell, let's cover that. And it feels like she didn't cover it because she didn't think it would be visually pleasing to open up a fridge and see a bunch of saran wrap in there. But at the same time, that feels better than just having uncovered chicken in any state, cooked or otherwise. But anyway, everyone is freaking out because they thought the chicken was raw. It wasn't raw. It was parboiled, and it was going to be used for a recipe in minutes. So it is pretty annoying that everybody has to just flip out about everything. Any fool knows not to put raw chicken uncovered in a fridge, And I mean, she does so many crazy things that for us to make up stories does not help things. So anyway, she's parboiled the chicken. It's ready. And before they can get the chicken out and fry the chicken, they've got to do several things. They're making a rub to go on the chicken. They're making all these sauces to glaze the chicken with. And they're making the tempura batter to dip the chicken in before they fry it. While they're in this process, we get this crazy exchange. And she has measured out all the ingredients, and she's just pouring it in while he talks to her about what the ingredients are. And then he says, and now we're going to put in the MSG. And she's like, yeah, I don't really know what the story is with MSG. I mean, I know like in the 90s and stuff, everyone said you shouldn't eat it. Well, what's the deal? And he's like, I'll tell you what the deal is. You want to know what the deal with MSG is? Racism. The reason people didn't want you to have MSG is because they were racist against Asians. And they said that it was not a good thing to eat. And it's just because they wanted to limit you from getting the Chinese food. That's what it comes down to. And it's just a food additive. It's the same thing as bouillon. It's the same thing as chicken bouillon. It's honestly in all of the American fast food. No, that's not making it better. But he's like, so they shouldn't have said anything about the Chinese food, but it's just Asian racism. That's all that is. And she's like, well, we don't like that here. And so she pours in all the MSG. Honestly, I was like, okay, what's the deal with MSG? Because I remember everybody talking about that too. MSG is fermented sugar. It comes from sugar cane. It comes from beets. It comes from molasses. And it is like, it's just a salt additive. It increases the flavor of processed foods. And some people do have a pretty negative reaction to MSG. It can cause flushing and headaches and nausea, but in large amounts. And it's kind of hard to determine if it's the MSG that's making you nauseous or the amount of fast food you would have to eat with MSG in it in order to receive those symptoms. Like, is it the MSG or the fact that you just ate like 11 quarter pounders? I don't know. There have been studies that have been shown in both animals and humans that MSG can cause brain toxicity. So I wouldn't say that it's, completely without its risks, I guess. It does tend to be in processed food. In a recipe like this, where you're making it at home and you're not like putting tons and tons in, I'm sure that it is fine. The FDA says that MSG is fine, but the FDA says a lot of things. So it's hard to really take their stamp of approval as something that I can take to the bank. But at the same time, I just feel like maybe we know more about MSG. Nobody's really complaining about MSG. I've seen it used in multiple recipes before. People do always use it sort of apologetically because of the stigma that it has. But I don't really know how bad fermented sugar can be if you're not using it in vast amounts. I don't know. I'm not a scientist or a chemist, so who knows? I just think that the idea that racism was involved has nothing to do with it. I think it might have something to do with the fact that there are studies that show brain toxicity. That'd be my guess, but what do I know? Anyway, after they get done making their MSG chicken, they begin to fry the chicken, which she admits she's never done before. Yes, here we have a home cook who has never made donuts or fried chicken. Now, granted, she is from LA, so do any of us think she's got a big fat vat of oil just boiling in the back so she can throw in all the chicken and donuts? Hardly. If I'm not surprised she hasn't. I'm sure she's made lots of healthy recipes I have never even considered making. But I just think that it's pretty wild that somebody who says they're African American has never bothered to make fried chicken. I dare say so. While they're frying this chicken and she is overwhelmed by a process she would never consider conducting in her own kitchen, she says that since she can't fry chicken, she's going to pop some bubbly.
I might not be able to fry chicken, but I can open a bottle of champagne.
So she opens up the bottle. He's like, I'm opening myself up to a lot of criticism here because, I get real red when I start drinking. And she's like, that's okay. We're just here to have a good time. Joy, 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 joy down in my heart. So they have their champagne, which to me, I'm like, for a show that it keeps trying to tell us that it's so relatable, who among us is over here frying up a vat of fat chicken, but also serving it with champagne? Somebody help her. I mean, I just don't know what it is she's trying to show us, but she's got to have that champagne because it cuts the grease, you guys. Nasty, greasy food. He and she continue to talk as they're cooking and plating the chicken, mostly him. In fact, all of him. He continues to press this idea that they could open a restaurant together. Let's open a fried chicken restaurant. If we were going to plate the food, this is what it would look like if we had a restaurant together. If we had a restaurant together, this is the cookbook we would have. We could make these pickles, and this would be the cover of the recipe. If we had it's all of this, like, it's hard to know if he's just trying to carry on a conversation with her, just to keep things going, which of course is part of it, or if he's really trying to hustle and plant these seeds and ideas about a possible collaboration in the future. And because he agreed to do this, and because he has been so honestly over the top complimentary about things we know that aren't true, like her knife skills, it just feels completely possible to me that he is potentially over here trying to gain further access to Meghan and to the attention that comes with being with Meghan. I just don't know if he understood the negative part of being with Meghan. Yeah, you get a lot of attention, but is it positive? Is it stuff that's going to help you? Probably. I mean, honestly, I would be interested to know about the traffic to his restaurant since he's been on this show, and he's not a nobody. People know who he is. So it's not like he needed her to dig him out of obscurity, but I wonder if this show has helped him, even if there has been some negativity. He's not like a vicious snake or anything like that. He's not like some slick Willy or anything like that. It just feels like maybe that's why these overtures of possible endeavors together feels kind of clunky, because he isn't this sort of slimy person. Like, maybe what he's saying seems a little bit amateur hour. Like, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do this, because he isn't this person that's constantly trying to hustle and make under the table deals. Or maybe he was just trying to keep the conversation going. You guys tell me what you think. Do you think that Roy Choi was trying to plant ideas, or was he just trying to have a conversation? It does help if you've seen the episode all the way through, because it kind of gives you some context. In the end, they eat, they lay out all the food. And Meghan takes a picture of all the food. She can't believe they've done this in a day. Honestly, I can't believe they've made this much stuff. I mean, he starts listing all the stuff they've done. They made the pickles, they made the kimchi, they made the crudité platter, they made the sauces. She parboiled the chicken and did all the brining earlier. Then there's all the stuff that you have to make to, like, the tempura batter and then the chicken rub. I mean, it's like there's so many things that were happening in this episode. It's a ton of food. And he gets done listing all the real things they did. And then she's like, and the donuts. We had donuts too. It's like, oh, let's just everybody forget that you made muffins and call them donuts. But anyway, at the end of the episode, they're laying out the food. They're trying the food. Of course, it's amazing. Meghan's over there chewing on a chicken leg that looks like her own. And then they decide that they're going to invite the cast and crew to some food because there's so much of it, So then all the cast and crew come in and you're like, thank God somebody's offering these people something. Because she's been over here sliding food and drink and samples over to Brooklyn the whole time. And you're like, what about all these other people who I know are on set? There's a lot of people in that room. And so everyone is eating it and everyone's like, oh my gosh, the best thing I've ever had. And honestly, probably is. It looks delicious. And that show for me was the most interesting that we have seen so far because there was somebody in the kitchen who knew what he was doing and who understood flavors and who understood bringing something that was more interesting than something you found on Pinterest. A cucumber sandwich cut like a butterfly. What? I mean, it's just like the donuts that were baked in a tin. You know what I'm saying? It's like, finally, bring somebody on screen who can make some food we want to eat, right? This episode is just more of Meghan. Like I said, she was not as annoying in this particular episode, but I don't have high hopes for tomorrow's episode because tomorrow she's got a friend coming over who appears to be somewhat of a real friend. She's having somebody over. I can't remember her name. I apologize. I'll remember tomorrow. It's the wife of that guy. His name's like Nacho Figuera or something. He plays polo. He's like the only polo player anybody's ever heard of. And it's his wife coming over. And I guess Meghan says their husbands know each other from playing polo together. And so now I'm like, become friends. Polo wives, you guys. And I started watching it last night. And then my husband was like, let's turn that off. And I was like, thank you, man. Cut me off from work. I need it. Yes, tell me to stop. And so I stopped watching it. But I feel like the two of them are going to be something to watch. And Meghan is already, in the opening scenes, was already just grating on my soul. So I have lots to say. I'm sure I will have lots to say about that particular episode. I'm looking forward to it. And thank you guys so much for watching this one and for keeping me company while I do this. If it weren't for you guys, I would not be able to make it through. But knowing that I get to come and talk to you guys about it makes it worth it. Okay, I will see you guys later. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Bye.